Good morning. Welcome back to the D404. Now, for those of you who are following the channel, you'll know that I'm not in my normal home studio today. I've actually taken my family away to the beach for a couple of days. Tomorrow, though, it should be back to normal studio, normal quality. I've been told the sound isn't so great working off this laptop, so I apologise for that. However, the weather is perfect. It's good to be away with the kids and the wife and some friends at the beach. So that's enough for the intro and why we look like this today. In Ukraine, General Zaluzhny, who we know there is a lot of talk, and that seems to have now been confirmed, that President Zelensky wishes to see him ousted as his role of commander in Ukraine. There has been reportedly a formal notification given by President Zelensky to the White House that he has decided to fire General Zaluzhny. This doesn't mean that it's been done yet, but it does mean that he has, reporting is that he has actually told the White House that this is his intention now. What is interesting about this situation is that President Zelensky is in a position now where he is less popular than the commanding general, which he is attempting to fire or throw out of his role. He's attempted at least twice now to ask Zaluzhny to leave, reportedly sending aides to Zaluzhny's people and saying, you've got to go, resign, you can have a nice ambassadorship or another role somewhere else, but you're no longer commander. In both cases, General Zaluzhny has said no. He said, I'm doing a good job. If you want to get rid of me, you fire me. I'm not resigning. So Zelensky's in a tricky position here because he has tried and failed to demonstrate his authority, which doesn't make him look good as a leader and as a president. And Zelensky's popularity is lower than Zaluzhny's, not only in the military, but in polling. A number of polls that I've seen now of the general population in Ukraine, general population seems to prefer and trust General Zaluzhny more than they do President Zelensky. So, as you can imagine, if you're trying to get rid of someone because you're starting to feel threatened and jealous by the appeal that they have, you try once or twice, it doesn't work. You are moving yourself into a position where, in this situation, I feel this is ripe for a military coup. There's every opportunity here now for General Zaluzhny to say Zelensky is weak. I've rebutted him, knocked him back twice on his desires for me to resign. He's not been able to follow through. Now he has perhaps not been able to follow through because the Americans have had some say in this. As we know, Victoria Nuland visited President Zelensky 2 days ago, visited Kiev. No doubt she was there to look to calm things down, perhaps smooth things over, at least for a little while, and until the Americans are happy with the upset and upheaval that would come from the firing of the commander. You can imagine if this were to happen in Russia, if there were this open media information coming about the bickering between Putin and his senior commanders in this conflict, it would be all over the Western press. So this is not a good look for Ukraine's leadership, and this is not a good look for the Americans, who are the major backer of Ukraine in this conflict. If it looks like the wheels are about to fall off, everything's wobbling around, it's not great. Hence, I think Victoria Nuland's visit, just to say, don't fire him right now. I know you want to, but don't, because it's going to upset the apple cart, and we really don't need that right now. I'm just speculating. That's what she may have been there for. She may have been there for entirely different reasons. And people who are far smarter and more connected to the situation than me might be able to let us know in the comments what they think has happened there. But I think that she's probably gone there to try to just stabilise things a little bit, perhaps giving Zelensky her vote of confidence that Zaluzhny should go, but when the time is right. Who knows on that topic exactly why she was there. But she was there, and Zaluzhny hasn't gone yet. So, depending on the conversations that she may have had with General Zaluzhny, he may well be in a position where he's either happy to maintain the status quo at this stage, or beginning to really see the writing on the wall that he is going to be ousted somehow. That's what the president wants. And if he wants to avoid that and avoid a fate which I think is unlikely to be one, which he would enjoy and desire, while he may be offered some ambassadorship somewhere, it's very likely that that ambassadorship will be stripped away from him within a year anyhow, given the likely breakdown of the Ukrainian administration. He's perhaps thinking he's far better to assume the position of control, to enact a coup, overthrow Zelensky, take control of Ukraine, be seen as a fresh face in that role, so wipe the slate clean with everything that's gone wrong for Zelensky, put that behind him and say that was then, this is now, and have an opportunity to go on and lead, whether that be lead Ukraine into a deeper conflict and war, or to perhaps take the opportunity to brand himself as a surprising politician and demand that Ukraine and Russia meet and negotiate and save what remains of Ukraine. This is, I think it's a huge opportunity for Ukraine if Zaluzhny were to enact a coup. But will he go that way, or will he continue the fight? We're yet to see. There has been more bad press for the Ukrainian military in Ukraine with the shelling of the bakery in Lysychansk. Lysychansk and Lugansk region was reportedly shelled by Ukrainians, actually struck by HIMARS, high mobility artillery rocket system, struck by rockets from that. And it's reported now that 28 people have died in that attack on what appeared to be, from some of the pictures I saw, just a suburban mall and reportedly a bakery, and people lining up to get bread, and they've been killed in that attack. These sort of attacks on civilians with no military benefit or purpose are only damaging Ukraine's image. People who are watching this channel might be saying, oh, why do I believe that that was a bakery? Because of the response that I've seen, and because any claims by particularly Ukrainian social media channels at this stage, that it wasn't a bakery and the Russians are making up and they shelled it themselves, is just likely to be yet again demonstrably wrong. We have had a number of examples of this. Yesterday you may have noticed there are now reports coming out that Ukrainian government is concerned about the return of the dead prisoners of war who died in the Zaluzhny 76 that was shot down a week or so ago. For the first week after that, all of the pro-Ukrainian channels were just outright denying that it had been done. They were claiming that if it had been done, the Russians had shot it down. If the Russians had shot it down, there were no POWs on there. Now it has all come out that there were POWs on there and they were shot down by Ukrainians using most likely, I think it's a PAC-2 Patriot missile. So I think the Lysychansk thing is real. I think it's just a really bad taste example of what has been happening in the Donetsk region since 2014. If you are not aware of Patrick Lancaster, then I strongly suggest that you go to Telegram and find Patrick's channel there and go and search on YouTube for Patrick's channel. He is an independent frontline reporter who has been embedded with Donetsk forces for years. If he still has the same pinned video on his YouTube channel, go and watch that. You will see that he's authentic, he's the real deal. In the video that he did have pinned there anyhow, it's in him from a couple of years ago in trenches, being shelled, being actively shelled. So he's a very interesting character. He's always frontline, doing great reports from there. And he has been reporting upon this constant shelling of Donetsk regions, and not just saying it like I am. He's there on the ground with video footage. He travels to the homes, the apartment blocks that have just been shelled, talks to the people, finds fragments of the rockets and shells with the US numbering and that sort of thing on them. So again, it's for these sort of reasons. I think the Lysychansk attack has been another one of these unprovoked attacks on civilians, which is just, as I say, diminishing Ukraine's picture as a nation in this conflict. And this is leading to things like what President Putin has been speaking about, which is this buffer zone. President Putin has said this demilitarised line should lie at such a distance from our territory that it would ensure the security of Russian cities, such that foreign-made longer-range weapons that the Ukrainian authorities use to strike peaceful cities cannot have an impact on us. Dmitry Medvedev, also who is the deputy head of the Russian Security Council, he has said yesterday the Russian president said it is necessary to create a demilitarised zone, cordon sanitaire, for the security of our country. Given the enemy's decision to supply the Kiev regime with increasingly long-range weapons, such a line should run along the borders of Lvov, which is in the far west of Ukraine, in order for it to play a real defensive role. I was talking about this on the show a couple of days ago, and I was suggesting that perhaps a 100-kilometre buffer zone might be what the Russians would be looking for, as most field artillery's got a range of being between maybe 15 and 18 kilometres. Some of the very high-powered new artillery coming out from the US and NATO next year, 2025, is expected to maybe have a range getting up to 80 or 100 kilometres or so. So you want to, for that purpose of artillery, push that buffer zone out to 100 kilometres so that people can't be just shelling you indiscriminately. However, when you're talking about these missiles, and here they are talking about the longer range missiles being given to Ukraine, HIMARS, even Scalps and Storm Shadows, air-launched missiles, those things have a range of near 300 kilometres. Unfortunately, I'm not in the studio, so I can't jump to my other screen and show you the map of Ukraine like we would normally do and arc out for you what a 300-kilometre buffer zone looks like on Ukraine. But if you take the Dnieper River, which travels from the north down the south, if you assume that everything to the east of the Dnieper, those oblasts, including Kiev, everything to the east of the Dnieper River is to become Russian-controlled territory, ultimately. If you then push 300 kilometres westward from that river line, as Dmitry Medvedev suggests, you're getting pretty close to Lvov as where the end of that buffer zone is. So I think they are suggesting that effectively from the Dnieper River, everything to the east will be Russia. At the Dnieper, a demilitarised zone for 300 kilometres will begin. Now, within that 300-kilometre zone, I imagine that other Ukrainian agriculture and activity, industry could go ahead and would be allowed. I imagine the Russians on the Dnieper River would look to trade with the Ukrainians, but there would be no military presence or capability until you were almost at the border of Poland. Effectively, the military capability of Ukraine, instead of being on the border of pre-February 2022 Russian border, which is what NATO had intended, will now be pushed back to effectively to Poland, is where the NATO capability within Ukraine will be beginning. There's an interesting piece of news when we go to the front line. The first US Abrams tank has been spotted. Just a couple of years ago, I've seen on X, the formerly Twitter, and Telegram, some reports. There's video footage of an Abrams just crawling along, and reportedly in Avdeevka. Now, Avdeevka is just to the west of Donetsk city. It is an area which has been under heavy fighting for the last two and a half months. Lots of reports of Russian gains as they push through this heavily defended and fortified industrial town, slowly working their way up to the coke plant. But an Abrams has been spotted. This is the first time there has been any evidence of an Abrams tank in Ukraine near the front line. It's surprising to some extent, given that the Ukrainians are being pushed back in Avdeevka. It will immediately have a major target on it and a bounty on it. The group of Russian forces that are able to drive their Lancet or land an anti-tank grenade onto that first Abrams and confirm it with video will be regarded as heroes. They will be given a substantial financial reward. There are bounties on these types of equipment, like there are bounties on the Leopard 2s and bounties on the Challengers. Now, the British MI6 has reportedly said the Challengers are no longer allowed near the front line. Too much bad press if they get blown up. And this is why it's surprising that the Abrams has been so close to the front line and the real fighting in Avdeevka, the heavy fighting there. Again, it is not going to look good in the Western newspapers if the front page is a picture of a burning Abrams or an Abrams that had broken down because its air filters became clogged, being towed by a Russian T-90 with a Russian flag hanging off it. These are the sort of things that are a risk now to the saleability of the Abrams tank. You know, if you'd sent a whole heap of Abrams over there and you had air cover and they did a monstrously good job, it would look great and you'd sell a lot more Abrams. If you send a few of them over there and they get chewed up, regardless of the fact that they don't have the air support they're built to interact with, pictures come out of them being destroyed. So it is likely, there are already jokes being made on X and Telegram that this tank, it's lucky that it's not in Gaza. If it was in Gaza, it would already have one of those red triangles bouncing on it, but it's quite likely that within the next day or so we may see some footage of Abrams, the first Abrams, having been destroyed in this conflict. Because I'm away, not in the studio, it's a little harder for me to do these videos quite as easily, so I'm going to keep this one quite short. But I will just go through the Ministry of Defence. This is the Russian Ministry of Defence numbers for the last 24 hours of fighting. In summary there, it's sort of on par, on average. There's reports of 720 Ukrainian men killed and wounded, at least that number is, in the last 24 hours. Remember, this number of 720 in a day is far less than the 1,000 a day, which Yuri Lysychansk, the former Prosecutor General of Ukraine, he's an interior minister now in the Rada, he had stated that Ukraine is losing killed and wounded 30,000 men a month, 1,000 a day. So this is a Russian Ministry of Defence numbers that I'm talking about now. It's 720. So they're not extrapolating and expanding these numbers wildly, like many people have suggested, when you've got Ukrainian members of parliament suggesting the numbers are higher than what the Russians are suggesting. So the Russians are suggesting yesterday across the front line, 720 men killed and wounded. I've also been keeping a bit of an eye on the artillery losses for the Ukrainians that are reported by the Russian Ministry of Defence. In yesterday's fighting, 10 pieces were lost, 2 of them self-propelled. The self-propelled pieces are, of course, very difficult to replace and are a real loss. They're much more difficult to strike, as they can fire artillery and then they can move somewhere else, shoot and scoot, they refer to it as. Whereas your fixed pieces, it's a lot harder to shift them. You like to dig them in and leave them there. So if you're losing self-propelled pieces, that's bad. In the Kupiansk direction, around Sinkovka and Terny is where the fighting seems to have been focused of late. 30 troops reportedly killed and wounded yesterday. Actually, I missed one. There's another, one Polish-made crab, another self-propelled piece. So that's 11 pieces and 3 self-propelled. They destroyed yesterday, as well as one M777 artillery system have been destroyed. Moving down to Krasny Liman, where the centre group of forces operate, they are continuing to battle Ukrainians, the 60th Mechanised, around the Chervenaya Dubrova area in Lugansk and near Yampolovka. And Torskoy, in these areas here. The reported losses for the Ukrainians yesterday amount to 120 men killed and wounded. A couple of armoured fighting vehicles in that area. No artillery reported destroyed, though, in Krasny Liman yesterday. Sometimes these reports, I think, are reflected like maybe a day later. You do sometimes see some pieces where it looks like they may have been struck, and then they turn up in the following day's reporting. But I guess that makes sense, given that I'm reading a snapshot of time over a 24-hour period. In the Donetsk direction, where the Yug group of forces are fighting near Krasnoy and are battling with the Armed Force of Ukraine's 112th Territorial Defence and 24th Mechanised Brigades. Around Klesheyevka and Shumy, they're fighting the 93rd and 22nd from the AFU. The fighting obviously very heavy around Donetsk. 380 troops reportedly lost yesterday, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 Cossack armoured vehicles, and in the counter-battery warfare, 1 Gvozdika self-propelled artillery system, 1 D-20 and 1 D-30 howitzer was struck. Moving down to South Donetsk, this is where the Vostok group of forces are operating. They are using attack helicopters in this area against the 72nd Mechanised Brigade and the 1st National Guard Brigade of Ukraine near Ugledar and Urozhaina. Up to 115 Ukrainian troops reportedly lost, killed or wounded, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 2 Akatsiya self-propelled systems and another D-30. As we move down further southwest towards Zaporozhye, here the Ukrainian 33rd, 65th and 118th Mechanised and 128th Mountain Assault Brigades are fighting around the areas north of Rabotne and Verbova. Ukraine has reportedly lost 45 troops in the fighting in Zaporozhye yesterday, 1 D-20 howitzer and 1 Grad multiple launch rocket system destroyed. And then finally in the Kherson region, around Ivanovka, Chaginka, Katsasky and Zolotaya Balks in the Zaporozhye region, but just to the east of Kherson. Here, 30 troops reportedly lost, 1 D-20 howitzer lost, and an M777 artillery system also reportedly destroyed. So the fighting across the front is continuing at about the same level as it has for the last couple of months, somewhere between 700 to 1,000 reported killed and wounded Ukrainian men each day, upwards of 10 or 11 or more pieces of artillery reported lost each day. So the Russians are just continuing to slowly pour on the pressure here. The Ukrainians being driven backwards slowly. There are multiple sources, Rybar, Military Summary Channel with Dima. If you go and check their reporting, you will just see the daily incremental chunks of land which are being bitten out of the territory held by Ukraine as the Russians do move their way forward. All right, I will leave that here for today. If you're enjoying the channel, please subscribe. I am also on Twitter, or X now. You can find the Deep 404 there. And as I say, tomorrow it should be back to sort of normal programming, hopefully with better sound and the ability to show you a little more information, video and that type of thing. Look, I hope you're having a great day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.